Hi, my name is Dr. Demetra Smith, and thank you for joining us for the third segment of Mapping the Journey to Empowerment, Part 3. Today's segment is about social models. We as a community can all become more passionate about making a difference and disrupting the stigma for people living with disabilities around the world. Stevie Wonder said, just because a person lacks the use of their eyes doesn't mean they lack vision. So what is the social model of disability? Well, the social model of disability was developed by people like myself living with the disability to show the general population how we perceive the world. The social model recognizes the barriers that we will face within society that creates low expectations and results in disabled people losing independence. So what are some of those barriers? Well, there's environmental and physical barriers, such as inaccessible infrastructures, lack of services, and poor communication. There's institutional barriers, such as lack of employment opportunities, non-inclusive legislation, policies, and procedures, and lack of educational opportunities. And then there are attitudinal barriers, negative stereotyping, poor understanding, and increased social isolation. The social model of disability explains that disability is caused by the way society is organized rather than by a person's impairment or difference. That's the medical model of disability. The social model looks at ways of removing barriers that restrict the life choices of disabled persons and can be removed so each individual can feel independent and equal in society with choice, purpose, and control over their own lives. Some examples of the social model in action could be a wheelchair user cannot access a building because stairs are there. The social model recognizes the issue is the building's physical structure, not the person, and a ramp should be installed to make it more accessible. A person with a learning difficulty wants to live independently but does not understand the application process or how to pay rent. The social model recognizes with the right services to educate and support the individual, they can pay rent and promote independent living. An individual with a visual impairment wants to read a popular book series so they can discuss it with their sighted friends. The social model recognizes that with the assistance of adaptive technology, the person can read this series and continue their social participation within their friendship group. There are ways that we can remove those barriers in society. But to recognize those barriers is one thing, removing them is a whole other thing that creates equality for people living with a disability, and the social model solution can help guide the general population to make these shifts to become a more inclusive world that promotes human diversity, confidence, and independence for all people regardless of their age or their ability. Some examples of how social barriers have been removed in society includes the disability rights activists and how advocates and educators in general attempt to shift negative perceptions and stereotypes of people living with disabilities. More accessible infrastructure such as ramps, accessible toilets, wider pathways, automatic doors. There are services and support to promote independence such as supported independent living or SIL or other disability programs. The development of adaptive technology can allow individuals to immerse themselves and participate fully in existing technologies like adaptive video games or even audiobooks. The invention of Braille, Auslan, and other forms of adaptive communication continue to promote overall social inclusivity and accessibility, as well as improve the education systems and one's ability to communicate with children who have special needs. There are ways to empower people living with a disability, and the United Nations Convention has set out obligations for equality, non-discrimination, accessibility, and the right to live independently and be included in the community. At the core, there are things that society can also do to continue breaking those social and attitudinal barriers by empowering people living with a disability. Whether it's an intellectual disability or a physical disability, here are 5 simple ways to empower every individual. See the person, not the disability. People living with a disability are just like everyone else. We have dreams, we have passions, we have interests, we have our own individual identities. And we don't want to be defined by what we look like, but by who we are as a person. The second thing is learn about the person behind the disability. Avoid negative stereotyping about a person just because of what you see. It's important for people to take the time to discover more about the person behind the disability and ask questions about what our needs are, what our wants are, rather than making assumptions about what our limitations are. This helps both parties find the most creative, innovative, and fun way that they may be able to spend quality time together. The third point is listen to the person behind the disability. When you listen to a person with a disability, you see them, and it ensures that they are feeling inspired and confident within themselves, regardless of their age or capability. When listening to a person with a disability, use active listening techniques as a cue to show that you're engaged in the conversation, and embrace emotional intelligence in case communication styles need to be changed or adapted so that the conversation flows effortlessly. The fourth thing to remember is encourage decision making. Whether they have to make a decision large or small, giving a person with a disability the individual right to make every decision in their day-to-day lives promotes self-esteem, independence, empowerment, and it builds confidence. And the fifth thing to remember is advocate for inclusivity. Joining people with disabilities in our fight against discrimination and building more inclusive attitudes will directly combat and disrupt the stigma and the barriers that those of us living daily with disabilities still face. Following disability etiquette is a great way to start building a greater inclusive community and a greater society. Examples of disability etiquette includes shaking hands, even if the person has a limited hand use or wears an artificial limb. A left handshake is acceptable, and even if the person cannot shake hands, acknowledging them with a smile and a spoken greeting is completely acceptable. When you're planning a meeting or another event, think about what specific accommodations you might need for a person with a disability to feel comfortable, engaged, and included. And if there is a barrier that can't be avoided, communicate that ahead of time. The journey to empowerment is a critical road that we all travel to some degree. Understanding that the social model of disability was designed through the lens of individuals who face environmental, institutional, and attitudinal barriers every day helps everyone to educate the greater population on the need to change and become more inclusive, more engaging, and more empowering. While over the decades society has made great headway in the right direction, it is vital that we continue to understand how social models shape the belief system of society. Join us as we continue breaking those barriers to stigma and ultimately create true equality for all individuals, regardless of age, ability, or capability. Thank you again for joining us for the Mapping the Journey to Empowerment series. We appreciate your diligence to being a part of making a difference. My name is Dr. Demetra Smith, Capable Minds, Hearts and Hands, the Potter's House IDD Outreach. We wish you a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from our heart and hands to yours.